episode of Recovery Rockstar. I'm so excited today to be having another individual shine to share his story on his journey in recovery. Before I begin with that, I'd like to highlight a few facts. So recently I was viewing the Vermont Department of Health's website, and when we're looking at the Vermont's hub and spoke model, right now Vermont is the only state that has the hub and spoke model, and this is in relation to MAT, which is medication assisted treatment. And in viewing the hub and spoke model, we see that the settings reported a 95% decrease in opioid use for people that were part of a survey that was done. So prior to getting into the hub and spoke model, which is getting into MAT treatment, there were 95% people that had a decrease after treatment. There were 92% that had a drop in their IV use, which is injection use. Also, when we're looking at public health and safety, 89% of these individuals showed a decrease in emergency department visits. 90% had a reduction in illegal activities and police stop and arrest, and 0 of them overdosed, whereas before the study and before they got into treatment, 25% of these individuals had overdosed within 90 days prior. So the statistics continue to show how essential it is that people be connected to treatment and recovery and to resources when they are struggling with substance use disorder. So I am going to introduce our next guest. This is our 3rd show. Today we have a young man named Joel Partlow who's going to share his story with us. I'm extremely excited because I don't know a lot of the details of his story, but I met him in his recovery, and immediately he shined as somebody who has a story that can share hope. So I'm just really excited to hear what he has to share with us today. So Joel, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
You're number 3 in a very new movement of the Recovery Rockstars, and we're really excited for the feedback that we continue to get from people that have enough courage like you do to share a little bit about yourself and your story. So if we can start kind of at the beginning, if you want to give us a little bit of background on, were you born and raised in the area and what your childhood was like?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born locally right here in St. Albans. Grew up on Elm Street for the most part of my life till, my parents separated when I was younger, about 10 years old, 12 years old, as long as I can remember. Things changed from there. My mother, lived up street. My father stayed down street, and we kind of did our things. Grew up between city school and BFA, so.
Do you feel like you had a little bit more freedom after the separation of your parents, that maybe the rules weren't as strict because it was hard for them to keep track of you?
Yeah, rules are always different in separated families. You have a mother or a father that could be more lenient than the other, or different situations depending on what happened in the separation and why the separation happened, even in some cases.
So when you look at that, what about, so when we're talking about like use, what was the age of your first use approximately?
The age of my first use, it was 18. I weren't even on the streets, unfortunately, but even at the same time, I was in prison, and drugs were just as easy to get a hold of in there.
Yeah.
So it started for me there.
So your first true experience with drug use was at age 18 in jail?
In the prison system, yep.
Wow. And for sometimes when we see different surveys and statistics out there, some people would consider you a late bloomer, because oftentimes we see people say 9, 10, 11 years old. So for you, it was in jail. And what substances were you introduced to?
Oh, Xanax, Clozapines, a lot of downers, marijuana. Occasionally, somebody would be lucky enough to get some heroin in. It kind of was a random, kind of what you got your hands on.
So you had pretty much access to just about anything.
Depending on who you knew.
Yep. And so when you look at, fast forwarding a little bit, how long were you in jail for, if you don't mind sharing that?
About 3.5 years.
3.5 years. And what age were you when you came back out?
I was 20 years old.
So you're 20 years old, and did you come back out into Franklin County community?
I did. It was difficult. It was extremely difficult transitioning into the community after being gone for so long. Even 6 months away, things change quite a bit. And in 3.5 years, things were incredibly different. I felt like a puzzle piece that just didn't belong. You know, I felt like I don't belong here. Like, I was so used to a whole different lifestyle and regiment and structure, and I was just kicked out, and it was, you know, I felt lost.
It's interesting too, because I look at the different people that I know who have been institutionalized in one way or another, whether it was through jail, and even for myself, I was in a facility for 13 months. And coming out, even though there's that excitement of being back out with family and friends and freedom, there's so much fear attached, because now you have to relearn how to live without that structure in place.
Yeah.
So what did you find yourself doing as you were getting back into the community, and how did you handle those challenges, I guess is a good question.
Even in prison, I worked in the auto shop. I directed other inmates and helping and things like that. And when I got out, it didn't take me too long to get a job and get myself on my feet. And at the time, with some help with the family, I was able to get into my own home and start life for the most part. It wasn't very long after that when I got a huge prescription of pills. And that's when it's like my whole no control Joel started.
No control Joel was fired up.
Yeah, and it just was like years.
So this prescription, was it something because of an injury?
Yeah. I was stupid and pedaling a bike one night across Lower Weldon, and I was hit by a car.
Ooh.
And I broke my collarbone, concussion, bunch of stitches, pretty roughed up, just a rough night.
Oy, sounds it.
And a sports medicine doctor just kind of pumped them to me. You know, there was no thought, nothing. Hindsight, even when he tried to wean me off, like almost 2 years later, it's like I was so far into it, and just my prescription was moneymaker for bigger things.
Right.
So it was.
And when was that approximately? What year was it that you?
Oh wow, that was early 2000s.
In the early 2000s. So you had the injury, and then you were
yeah.
getting prescribed pretty easily.
Yeah. And once you're in that group, once you find that group, it's not that it's difficult to find something. You know, you can usually find something.
And then you find too. So what was your drug of choice once you were fully addicted?
Percocet 30s
Percocet.
was.
And did you find that, like with your prescriptions, that you might take? I mean, I'm somebody in recovery too. So if it says to take 2, then 8 must be better, and then 16 must be better. So were you running out early?
Yeah, definitely. I noticed I was running out early, and then I realized even at that time when I originally started on the pills, I had family. Like, I didn't even realize, like, family that were close to me that were like, hey, can I buy some of those? Or can I do this? So, you know, even at then, I didn't really think of how deep something like that was. It was like, oh yeah, it's a community. This is like my group. These are my friends. This is what we do. You don't ever think of what's going to happen or where you're going to go. You just know you're sick when you can't get it, and you're going to look for it when.
Did you find yourself getting really desperate when you ran out or you couldn't find something and you started getting what we call dope sick or withdrawing?
Yeah, for some of us, even me, it becomes criminal. You know, there's no smart about it, but it becomes criminal. You end up stealing, you end up lying, you end up going down a whole different path that's connected to your use, and, you don't really think of it.
So it seems like there's kind of a trend for people, and the length of time might vary, but there's a trend where, first we're enjoying it, having fun with it, then it becomes a little old and we decide, okay, I got to stop this. Then we learn that we can't, we don't have the ability to, because that like survival mode kicks in. So do you have any like specific event or events that happen where you realize like, I'm going to need more help than just saying I'm done with this? Like, did you have a point that you felt you started to hit a bottom and you were ready to get some help?
I've had a few bottoms, honestly, and I never really made the step to. I never really felt like I was ready to be healthy, and until just 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I hit a lot of bottoms. There was one point where I was selling drugs to make my money, and I was like, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this no more. So I just threw it away, and thinking that by giving something up, I would, I'd eventually help myself in the right direction. And it never really did, because I wasn't really ready. When I was ready, I thought, okay, now I can buy Suboxone on the street. So if I do it by myself and then I take myself off of that, I'll be okay. So I tried it, and then it was like, Jesus Christ, this is dumb. This isn't the smartest thing to do. I gotta find a better way. Mm-hmm. And I had somebody that was really close to me get me in touch with Dr. Roberts. And I know a lot of people had a hard time with him, but I couldn't give a more platinum honorable mention to a doctor than Dr. Roberts. He was rough.
He was the one that you first got connected with when you were ready to seek treatment.
Yes. And he does have some pretty rough bedside manner as far as the doctor goes, but he said some stuff that really hit my heart, and like at that foot in the door, it kind of gave me a light. It gave me, something went off in my head, like, oh man, I've been thinking about this all wrong. And he didn't have the best way of saying things, but it hit home, and that's what mattered for me. What
I find interesting too is that in just about everybody I talk to, and including my own journey, that usually we may not forget all the details around it, but we remember the first time that something was said or done that gave us that ray of hope. Mm-hmm. So for you, it sounds like that was kind of the opportunity to realize, like, oh, my perspective hasn't been on point. And I think that's what, to some degree, we all need that. And it's really the relationship. It's really somebody taking the time to tell us like it is. And you were mentioning bedside manner, and whether it's one doctor or the next, or even a counselor, I think because we're all so different, that mm-hmm. there's no one way to help somebody. Because there's
absolutely.
Somebody who might just need that hug and to be able to cry on your shoulders. And then there's other people, I'll say like myself, and it sounds like you, that mm-hmm. we need a tough boot in the rear end, because if we're coddled, we just soak it up, and we need to be like strongly reminded. So it's a different method depending on the person.
You're right.
So it sounds like for you, kind of the tough love, but also a little bit of truth was what helped you decide to move forward.
It pushed me, and I didn't really feel like I was ready. I was ready to leave the maintenance program, and until I don't think it was a bottom for me. I think it was, I'm ready to step away from this. I'm ready. I have the structure in my life. I have the stability in my life. I have the support in my life, which is really, really important. And we lose so much support through our addiction and our family, and a lot of times for some of us, like you said, we need that swift kick in the butt, or in a lot of cases they need the compassion. They need to know that they're still loved. They need to know that they're still cared about, and even that goes as far as the family. It goes to the community too. I think the community understanding of it needs to be heightened a little bit. It needs to be a little more informed.
Absolutely. And that's what you're doing. That's what I love, is what you're doing right now. It's things like this where, I like to be open that I was asked to do some kind of a recovery series, mm-hmm. and I don't have training. I don't know what that looks like, but what I do know is that there's such a need for hope to be spread. And there's a lot of people like you that are excited and willing to share it. And you just touched on a few of the things that are essential, is that we need compassion, mm-hmm. we need love, we need purpose, we need support. Mm-hmm. So for you, obviously, that was a big piece for your recovery. And what are some of those supports? You touched on the fact that you had a supportive doctor.
Yep.
You mentioned family. So how does that come into play with not only getting in recovery, being in recovery, but having a positive recovery? What does that look like for you?
From the family aspect?
Yeah.
I can tell you, it feels great.
Yeah.
It's a lot of encouragement. It's a lot of faith in knowing that you can do it. That they've seen the steps you've taken, and they know that you want to do it. So the support of it, the encouragement, I know you can do it. Not so much, oh, you can try it. I know you can do it. I'm going to give it my best effort. It's stuff like that.
And it's interesting because we look at, when we're seeking treatment and recovery, that we've got the wreckage of the past, which can be overwhelming, and we're taught to You can't fix it all overnight. So some of the best ways to repair that is doing like what they call a living amends. And that's just showing each day a commitment to your recovery and a commitment to your health. So for you, approximately when did you start on the medication assisted treatment, the Suboxone program? Like approximate year even? Was it like the mid 2000?
No, actually it was later. It was roughly 2013.
So around 2013.
13, 14, yeah.
And that provided, we were talking a little bit earlier too, that it provided a little bit of structure for you. So you had an idea of, I have an appointment to do. You had some accountability, right? Because I'm
Yes.
assuming there was UAs
Absolutely.
involved.
Yep. Urines, doctor's appointments, counselors, all that is structured. It's part of, keeping you on track, keeping you aware that, oh, I have an appointment this week. Oh, my color came up. Oh, I got to go see my doctor. Things like that. I got to call my prescription in. It's all, it's all the structure of your wellness to get yourself back to a healthy point in your life. Yeah.
And it's a practice, right? So it gets you to practice being responsible again, where maybe before, I know for me, we're like feral animals. we're kind of like going feral and free.
Yep.
And then we decide to get into recovery and treatment, and we need that guidance. And I'm happy that you mentioned that it's a package deal, right? Because a lot of times people might misunderstand that and think MAT or medication assisted treatment is just trading a drug for another. I hear that so much because there's not the understanding that with getting something that helps you, chemically and medically, there's a big requirement of the most important piece, which is the counseling, and it's the reparative work.
Yes.
So for you,
counseling.
what was some of that, like with the counseling piece, what did you find helpful with that? Was it being able to be open with somebody? Was it getting suggestions or all of the above?
For me, it was somebody to be comfortable with. And I didn't really find that comfort in anybody besides Larry White.
Oh, yeah.
He would meet me at a restaurant. He'd meet me anywhere. He'd come to my house, and being in my home setting, I felt more comfortable to express more. To be able to touch on topics that I may not feel comfortable driving 50 minutes out of my way to go sit in a comfortable hot office with somebody I don't even know. Makes it difficult for me, and I know some other people like that, but not everybody's like that. So it made it comfortable for me to be able to open up to somebody that was able to come to me, that was able to meet me, not even at my house, but somewhere that is comfortable for me.
That's huge too, because I think sometimes when we're looking at something that's like a clinical setting or very structured, that as much as we need the structure to some degree, when you're looking at, again, the solution being a relationship. So the relationship with your counselor was the most important piece. And that's something that I find myself focusing on more and more when people ask, well, what do you think is the solution to this epidemic? And it's relationship. And you don't have to have specific training to have a relationship with somebody and let them feel that they're cared for.
Exactly.
So he met you where you were at, which is fantastic because we hear that a lot. We'll meet people where they're at, and it's like, okay, let's see what that looks like instead of just the idea of it. But I love hearing that he was willing to go right to your house or go to the coffee shop.
Wherever, which made it really nice. And, eventually, like he also counsels my wife at the same time. So he also comes to the house for her. And even though where I'm at now, I know specifically I don't have to see him, but I know for my mental health, I like to see him.
Yeah, quality of life.
I feel better, and that was my whole motivation to stepping off the maintenance program and becoming healthy and finding other alternatives for life. And
so that's something I want to come to now, because your journey started with needing help, getting into treatment, getting on a maintenance program, and then you got to that point where, and you've touched on it a little bit, that you decided that you were ready to get off that maintenance program and that you no longer needed the medication. Right. So what did that look like?
Well, at first, it was a question. Do I want to do this? Am I ready for this? And I kind of, going through the maintenance program, I had like 6 doctors in my short period of time.
Yeah.
And the monotony of not being comfortable with a doctor because I didn't get to know them in a short period of time, and I'm bouncing through these, and I think if I wasn't so comfortable with my counselor at the time, I think there could have been a possibility of a relapse because there was no stability in my treatment at the time. And that made it really difficult because I didn't know if I was going to see the same doctor or I was going to have a new doctor. And it seemed like every few months I was getting a new doctor. So I got to the point where I was like, I am ready for this.
Yeah.
I am ready for this. I'm ready to start the wean process.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I dropped 2 milligrams, not necessarily as quick as I could. I did it right. I took my time, I thought. My departure, at the time, I didn't think it was right, but now that I see it, I think it was right. I think I did the right things, and I think I took the right steps to make it happen. I'm still clean and sober today. I still see my counselor, and I'm still very supportive of anybody, especially my wife right now, who's doing the same thing.
So there's a theme there. Sometimes people ask if somebody's put on medication, well, what's the length of time? How long is that supposed to be? And there is no one answer. For some people, it's for life. For some people, it's a very short time frame just to kind of get a little bit stabilized. And so for you, I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about you being open and sharing this is because I know there are some people that are feeling the same thing, that, this was a great part of my journey. Now I'm ready for that next step. And there's so much of fear attached to it. So for you, I think you kind of answered some of this. Did you have fear, and what helped? You had a counselor, you had family support. Was there anything else, even little things? Like, do you read positive affirmations, or do you have something that you enjoy doing that just kind of helps you feel grounded or feel joyful, even if you're feeling physically ill?
My kids, my animals, my family. The things that are closest to me, that are part of me, are the most important things to me, as should everyone be. And those are my therapy from my counselor.
That's fantastic. So when you look at the big picture of, at a fairly young age, getting into some trouble, going to jail, coming out, having a drug habit now, having it increase as a result of an injury, then finding treatment and going through the process of doing their treatment with medication and then getting off it, would you have ever thought, back when you were in the worst of the worst, that you'd be where you are today, sharing your story with others?
Absolutely not. There was a point when I honestly wondered if I'd make it to see 30. And here I am, almost 40, and I'm like, this is good. This is good.
It's unbelievable, because that's what I hear so many people say, that I never would have thought in a million years, first off, that I'd live to see 30. And secondly, that not only do you have your family back, you've got your life, but you're a ray of hope to people out there that are hurting and may not really know if there's an end game and there's a way out. And they'll watch this and hear your story and probably think that you're telling their story, because we see that a lot, where people in recovery, we speak almost a certain language because maybe what it looked like is different, but the emotions are the same. And we don't forget how bad it was. And I like to tell people that getting in recovery, it didn't open up the gates of heaven, but it opened up the gates of hell so I could climb out and finally experience some life.
That's the truth.
So for you, if there's something that you could say to invoke hope out in a community that sees a lot of the negative stuff on the news, what would that be?
Nothing's impossible. Absolutely nothing is impossible. Like we just talked about, support, hope, structure in some cases. There's ways, there is ways to make things happen. And in my book, nothing's impossible. It can happen. Hope is there, and you just got to reach for the help. Take the help when it's there.
Awesome. I like to say a lot of the times, and I heard it in your share too, is that when we're using and we're active in our addiction, we want to be the best in the world, and it's all about us. And yet when you get in recovery, there's that subtle shift from trying to be the best in the world to being the best for the world. And it sounds like, just hearing you talk, that's what it's all about. Being a worker among workers, being a husband, a father. What do you have for animals? What's the pets?
Pets. We have 2 dogs and a cat in the house. We have beef cow, dairy cow. We have horses. We have goats.
So you have a lot of beings that rely on you.
Yeah. It's a team effort, though. There's there's a handful of us on the farm that make a lot of things happen, and between, you know, my regular job aside from the farm, I'm busy. I'm on call 24/7, so it's nice to have the extra help and you know, even the support there.
Well, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story. It's amazing. I'm so proud of you. I know many people are super proud of you. You're going to be very well received in the community, and just keep on, you know, doing the great work. And I think for us, it's just never forgetting that with the way that the disease that we have, we can't safely use, but we get to a point, like you said, that we don't want to anyway, because, you know, even with like you realize with your counselor, you don't talk to him because it's a mandatory thing. You talk to him because you realize the value it has. Those healthy decisions are huge.
Yep, mental health is really important, really important.
And I think that's something that sometimes people lose sight of, is that it's not about the substances. It doesn't matter what the substance is. It doesn't matter if sometimes it's food and exercise. It's not just drugs and alcohol.
Right.
It's what's the underlying issue that's making us reach outside ourselves to try to get control over something that we don't have control over.
Exactly.
So congratulations on the great
you.
work you've done. I'm so excited. We just had our 3rd episode. Fantastic guest. As always, I want to put in a plug for Narcan. That's the overdose kits that are available at multiple sites in St. Albans and Franklin County. There's a Turning Point in Franklin County, the Howard Center. It's a lot better to have a kit and never need to use it than to need a kit and not have it. So I also encourage people to continue to look at the Vermont Recovery Network websites, the Pair Vermont website. They do a lot of training for people that are seeking training in recovery. And as always, just know that if there's anybody out there struggling, there is a solution, and more of the solutions will come, so we look forward to next month.